Hello Aries, and welcome to your reading. This is Bright Soul Collective Tarot, and my name is Laura, and this will be your intuitive insights and advice for the month of April 2022. So this reading will be for Aries, Sun, Moon, and Rising. And to start off, I have to say happy birthday, happy Aries season, happy spring. So many things going on right now. Happy astrological new year. There's all sorts of new energy coming in for you guys, which is really exciting. So I hope that you are making the most of it, whether your birthday has already passed or is yet to come. I hope you take some time to celebrate. Your energy is highlighted and exalted over this next month. So yeah, I'm hoping that everything is going well for you guys, and I'm really looking forward to see what comes through for you all. It's been a long road to get to this reading. I channeled your messages the other night, and it was kind of a weird vibe, and I was going to follow through with the reading, but I didn't feel quite right, and it even took a long time after I channeled your messages to get these oracle cards for you. So things are feeling a little bit better today. So I figured, yeah, it's a good day to read for you guys. So as always, before we get started, just keep in mind that these readings are general in nature, so not all the information that comes through will necessarily apply to you. Definitely take anything and everything that resonates, however that makes sense for your specific situation. Keep an open mind to something or anything that might be helpful, and you can just leave the rest. So here I've got your oracle cards. As usual, we'll pull some tarot and clarifiers and finish off with some affirmations. I'm also going to pull you an additional oracle card just to tie everything together at the end. And instead of interpreting that one as I do with these oracle cards, I'll simply read directly from the guidebook and just see kind of how that wraps everything up. So that's fun. And as I have been doing these last few readings, I will start with your channeled messages. So it's interesting because I think for you guys last month, I had something around like being easily distracted or like sensitive to noise. That was definitely coming through again. But it's funny because before I even started channeling your messages, I found it was kind of like difficult to focus. So it's like I felt like I had anxious thoughts, but I wasn't actively thinking about anything, but there was like a sensation of like my mind just racing from like topic to topic to topic. And although I wasn't like I've experienced that energy before, but in this case I wasn't actually thinking about anything. It was more like that sensation. So it kind of made me think of like laying in bed and just like not being able to get to sleep because your mind is like almost involuntarily racing and like just jumping from thing to thing, and it's just like this disruptive, unsettled energy. So some of you might be struggling with sleep, maybe with anxiety, maybe length or quality of sleep might be an issue. I'm not sure. But that's definitely kind of like the vibe that I got to start things off. So the first thing that came through was migraines. So I don't know if you might be suffering from migraines. That might be something that you've either struggled with for a while or maybe something that's relatively new. Maybe I know some people experience them like because of environmental reasons, so it could be something to do with spring allergies, I'm not sure. So that did come through, and with that came like a sensitivity to noise and light. So the idea that like sounds, people speaking, like the kind of background noises that might regularly be kind of disruptive for you if you are just a generally sensitive person, being amplified and like almost intolerable. And it's just like, even sensitivity to light. So I'm not sure if that is specifically connected to the migraines. I know that that is a common, I guess, symptom that people experience. So I don't know if those for sure go hand in hand, or maybe you just have, maybe you're hypersensitive, or you have been, or maybe particularly this month. The next thing that came through was like Raynaud's disease. So I only know a little bit about that. I know it's like usually it's associated with like fingers and toes, but it can be like any extremity, and it's kind of like a circulatory issue. So your fingers get like really cold and they turn white. And it's kind of like it can be sparked by exposure to cold. But I also read that it can be brought on by like emotional reactions as well, and that it can spark like, I don't know if there's some kind of like something to do with the circulation, and it kind of just like cuts circulation off. And so you end up with like cold, white looking extremities. And some people are more prone to that. So I don't know if that's something that you might connect with, if that makes sense. You might just be having circulatory issues in general. But yeah, it was funny because my palms always get really hot when I read cards, and my fingers are on average, like I'm not like an overly warm person, but when I was channeling these messages, my fingers were like cold, 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 like very cold. So interesting. I don't know if that's something you already suffer from. It might be something to look into if that sounds familiar to you. The next thing that came through was marsupials, which I thought was kind of curious. So obviously that would be like kangaroo, koala, opossums, I think wombats. There are a whole bunch of different marsupials, and they're obviously the ones with the little pocket. And so I was doing some research to try and see like what relevance that might have, because I know I got the sense of like, you know, being a protector, or perhaps like, you know, they carry around their young. So that might be something that you relate to. One thing that I learned in my Googling that I did not know is that marsupial offspring are actually born premature, like almost like months premature, and they continue developing like in the pouch. So that also could be a thing, like maybe having a premature baby, maybe you were premature as a baby, like I don't know if that has some significance. Like I said, very curious. So the next thing that came through was forged in fire. And so I feel like it's kind of appropriate. You know, you are Aries. This is Aries season. And it's kind of like, I got the image of like a phoenix rising from the ashes. And so it's kind of like your struggle, your strife, all of the roadblocks that are thrown in front of you, the challenges, the things that are, you know, not ideal in your life. It's like, I got the sense that it's like, this is meant to be a very cleansing type of energy. And like, I almost get the sense, because it came hand in hand with like trial by fire. So it's like, I don't know, maybe being thrown into something and just having like not knowing what you're doing, not knowing how to resolve a specific issue, really just kind of having to find your way through it, struggle your way through it. And it may not look pretty, and it may not be an enjoyable experience, but it's like the whole purpose is like you're being strengthened, but it's also giving the opportunity for the things that don't serve you, whether those be habits or beliefs, relationships, whatever, to kind of be like burnt away. So it's kind of like there's the opportunity for rebirth, there's the opportunity for strengthening and transformation, and to rise out of the ashes kind of stronger than before. So you might feel as though you're being tested. Maybe you have been tested for quite some time. So I got the sense that that's like a big theme for this month. If that makes sense for you, it might be, yeah, that you're just being forged in fire and made stronger. Interesting. The next thing that came through was alabaster doll. Very obscure reference for me. I know that alabaster dolls are a thing, but I also know that's a phrase that people use. Like sometimes they use it to describe somebody, you know, who's very fair skinned. Perhaps like you were referred to as an alabaster doll, you know, as a child, or even now, or you have a child that, you know, maybe that's like a term of endearment. I don't know if you have any kind of connection to that, but that was another interesting thing. The next thing that came through was mylar, which now that I'm kind of haha, puns. Now that I'm kind of reflecting back on it, it's interesting that came up just shortly after Forged in Fire, because mylar is like one of those highly reflective, insulating type things, right? And I'm pretty sure that those like firefighters have mylar blankets. Like I think those like the people who fight forest fires, I think they have those like little, they can cover themselves to help protect from the heat. So it's almost like a sense of, so you might have some connection to mylar specifically. It's used in a whole bunch of different capacities. But it could be also more of like a metaphorical thing in terms of being able to like protect yourself. So throughout this process, while you're being forged in fire, also being able to protect yourself and kind of like insulate from really long-term damage too. Or it could be like a coping mechanism or something like, yeah, I don't know. Something that is going to help you work your way through struggles, or like I said, it could be actual mylar in general. The next thing that came through was like something to do with metabolism or metabolic issues. And like the sense of like either being really hot all the time or being really cold all the time, maybe even fluctuating. That could be connected to like thyroid potentially. I know that and like hormones, that has a lot to do with it. And metabolic issues can also be related to like diet and how we process food and store energy in our bodies. So no specific details on that. That was just a general sense that there might be some kind of either metabolic issue or maybe a focus on metabolism, rehabilitating metabolism, something like that. If you are experiencing health issues that could be related to metabolism, it might be worth getting checked out. I know that sometimes when it comes to like thyroid and metabolic health, the information or like the details that they check for, the thresholds, there's a lot of room for variation in the thresholds. And so like medically you might not be diagnosed, but you can still have an imbalance that will affect you quite significantly. And I think in that case, more of like a naturopath would probably be able to do tests or maybe to interpret results in such a way that there might be room to kind of deal with things more holistically. I'm not sure, but something to consider. The next thing that came through was reciprocity. So, in terms of relationships, that could apply in any and all areas of your life, anywhere where you're dealing with other people, focusing on reciprocity. So that might be something that you're really trying to focus on and achieve. Perhaps if you've experienced relationships that were not reciprocal in nature. Because it's like, if you are going to be more mindful of your time and energy, then you want people who are kind of in the same space and that are following the same kind of path, so that you're able to work together effectively, but also respect each other's boundaries and personal time and things like that. The next thing that came through was everything is gravy, which is funny because that's not something that I ever say. So you might actually be feeling that way, like, okay, everything is fine. It could be a deflection because everything is not gravy, and that's just, either either saying it sarcastically, or maybe just trying to like deflect and pretend like everything's okay. Yeah, I don't know. That was kind of funny. The next thing that came through is Marlboro, like the cigarettes, like Marlboro Man. So I don't know if those cigarettes specifically have some kind of significance, if the Marlboro, I can't even say the word, if the Marlboro Man has some kind of significance. I know he's like a cowboy, so there might be some, yeah, some kind of, maybe some of that you relate to is being that. Maybe you have a memory tied to that. I have no idea. That was kind of interesting. Maybe something to do with cigarettes specifically. Maybe you used to smoke and you've been thinking about taking it back up again. Maybe you're trying to quit. I have no idea. Interesting though. So cigarettes in general might have some kind of significance. The next thing that came through is rheumatism. And so I know that's kind of like a not so formal way of addressing like almost like joint issues, things like arthritis. Generally it's inflammation. Sometimes it's like, tendons, ligaments, connective tissue. So there could be like inflammation, aching, limited range of movement in certain joints. So that might be something that you're struggling with. And I know that obviously like we are sensitive to our environment as well. So sometimes even changes in the weather can cause things to flare up. So that might have some significance to you. The other thing that came up like while I was considering this was like CBD oils. So all of the THC has been removed, so there's no kind of it's not going to have the effect of like the actual drug. It has more of like the calming, anti-inflammatory properties. And so I know that those can be consumed, they can be applied topically, and those tend to be a natural pain reliever, also stress reliever. I know my father-in-law suffers from both rheumatoid and I don't know what the other type of he has both types of arthritis. And so we've kind of just in the last like year or two gotten him on the CBD oil train, and that's like at least one more thing that he kind of has in his arsenal. So that might be something you're already connected to, but if not, something to consider. The next thing that came through was elevators, and there's a sense of like whether ascending or descending, being able to like kind of like move quickly and skip floors or steps or stages. And so it's kind of like the idea, like you can get on the elevator and if no one else is there, you can go all the way to the top floor, no interruptions, and you don't have to make all the stops along the way. And then it's kind of, I got like the vision of somebody like coming into the elevator and just like pressing all of the buttons and leaving. And then you're stuck there having to stop at every single floor. So there might be a sensation of like having to do a lot of things that don't need to be done. Maybe like physically there are tasks that it's like, I've already done this doesn't need to be done, or conversations, points, like topics, this doesn't need to be revisited. It might be a sense of redundancy. And I don't get the sense that if you do, or if you are experiencing something like that, where it's like kind of little roadblocks, little things that feel insignificant, like it's like, there's a faster way to get there and you don't want to have to make all the stops, but it's like maybe out of your control, however that might apply to you. It's kind of, I don't get the sense that you need to make all of those stops because you need to master those skills or whatever the case may be. I think it's more bigger picture. If you do find yourself being challenged on that level, it is being patient, and understanding that, sometimes things are unavoidable. Sometimes there are things that we just have to do, even if they don't make sense. And just maybe try to approach it as a test for you, in terms of, being able to be flexible when those types of challenges arise, especially if they're out of your control and you can't really do a whole lot about it. It's like you kind of just have to find peace in it. But it can be really frustrating to do that if you know that there is a more effective or efficient way to do it. If you know that it's like a waste of time, like getting caught up in red tape is kind of like a similar vibe or energy. And so I think it's also important to acknowledge, like, yeah, you can get in the elevator and you can go all the way up really quickly, but you can also go all the way down really quickly. So there's a kind of a sense that like there could be, like a major takeoff or a major descent on some kind of topic or level or area of focus. And I think that that might be a test for you. And whether you ascend or you descend, it's kind of like, it's going to be whatever you make it. And I think your attitude and your approach and your willingness to just like maybe see it as a test, maybe this is part of being forged in fires, this is being patient with, getting caught up, in situations that are less than ideal. The next thing that came through was like Freedom 55 financial. And then like shortly after that, there's Fortune 500. I don't think they're connected, but definitely something to do with money, finances, perhaps savings, and the number 5. So I don't know if that specifically makes sense to you. There's kind of like an idea of saving for the future, maybe like early retirement is something that you're considering, saving for retirement, some kind of investment. So I don't know if that's something that's been on your mind, or it's something that you're kind of getting ready to make a decision on, or you've been doing a lot of thinking or debating about. That's worth keeping in mind. And then the last thing that came through was Wheat Belly. So I know that's a book and it's all about gluten, and I think how, wheat, the strains of wheat and farming, and like the quality has changed over the years and been modified. It's no longer what it used to be, and that's why people are having so many digestive issues. It's more difficult to process, and it's causing like bloating and all sorts of issues. And I know that can also cause a lot of inflammation as well, which might be part of this like rheumatism perhaps. So if you haven't read the book, it might be worth looking into it. Maybe even just Googling like wheat belly and seeing if there's anything that makes sense to you, or perhaps you're already aware that you have a sensitivity to gluten and it's something that you're trying to avoid. Not sure, but that's kind of interesting. The other two general things that came through just before I started reading is like I was highly focused on my posture. So some of us might need to do a better job being mindful of our posture and sitting up straight. That being said, I did read something that says like it's not really healthy for us to be forcing ourselves to sit up straight all day, every day. Like it's important to engage those like core muscles, to kind of like roll the shoulders back, but it's like you also can't maintain that posture all day. Because it's like it's putting your muscles under stress too. So it's kind of like being mindful of your posture, especially if you're someone that tends to slouch, especially if you are sitting for a large portion of the day, looking at a tablet or a phone or computer. Being mindful of your posture, trying to correct now and then, perhaps doing exercises that will help, and then taking a break as well. And then the next thing that came through also was the idea of transcending emotions. So this might be a good month. Like maybe if you are feeling tested, maybe if you are feeling a little bit impatient, like there are roadblocks coming up, it might be helpful in like allowing you to honor your emotions and take what they have to offer you, but also disconnecting from them so that to a level that you're able to like transcend that any kind of disruption in terms of your ability to make decisions. Yeah, that came up too. So I thought that was kind of an interesting energy to start with. So we'll take a look at your oracle cards. Your first one is deep knowing. Right, and your second one is what you want wants you. Actually, I might put these here so you can kind of see them, and then I'll try to fit. Oh, that's a little bit washed out. I'll try to fit the tarot cards in the middle when the time comes. So right off the bat, it looks like April is going to be a month of trying to live a little bit more intuitively. And I sense that the major kind of struggle in terms of living intuitively is trusting your gut, right? Trusting the information that you pick up, trusting that it is a valid source of information, because both of these cards kind of speak to the fact that allowing your heart or your intuition or however you want to kind of explain it, that sense of knowing, allowing that to guide you is something that is quite often discouraged just by general or in general by society. It's not necessarily highlighted as a valid way to process information or to move through the world. And I think part of that reason is that it just seems too unstable to a lot of people. And I think part of that issue is that it can be difficult to tell the difference between your intuition and your gut feelings and your emotions. So it's kind of like your own personal bias, your own personal desires. And it's recognizing that to a certain extent, your desires are connected to your intuition in a certain way. So there's a fine line between following your heart and what feels right to you and allowing yourself to connect to the things that you truly desire that are going to be beneficial for your personal happiness and your development, and just seeing what you want to see or trying to make things happen in a way. So it's like disengaging from the mind and connecting to the heart. And both of these cards speak to that and kind of encourage that. So I get the sense like, to be honest, it took me a really long time to get these cards out for you. Like especially from this deck, there were just so many cards falling out, and I was just, yeah, I had to just start over like probably 3 or 4 times, because I'm like, I'm just not, even when these came out after I channeled the messages, I was like, I'm not quite satisfied with them. But I think it's because, like I said, the energy was a little bit weird, and now that I'm connecting with it here and now, it's like this is a very, very uplifting kind of energy. And I kind of get the sense that some of you are spiritual in nature, or you want to be spiritual in nature, but you're kind of closeted about it. Like you might be worried about being perceived as weird, or maybe like flaky, or just unstable, unprofessional, like a little bit too out there. But you might have like a good intuition, a good sense of intuition. You might be highly sensitive and highly receptive, and you might pick up a lot of stuff like you don't necessarily know how you know it, but you know it. And even if that can't be validated by external sources or something that is solid or tangible, you have the sense that that is true and that is right. And I would say that if you feel that way, you're likely right. And so that might be something that you want to develop, or that you want to connect to, but you might be feeling a little bit hesitant to fully allow yourself. There might be a lot of overthinking, and overthinking might come from not only over analysis, because you do tend to be sharp and strategic, and like you're good at kind of making assessments. So it can be easy to get caught up in that, like matters of the heart and like the intuition. As soon as we start trying to understand them logically, everything kind of unravels, because we're never going to be satisfied logically, because it's not something that you can make logical sense out of. That's why it's something that we feel, right? It can't. And that's why it can be difficult to allow ourselves to trust it. So yeah, that's the general sense that I'm getting, is like you have gut feelings, and perhaps you've followed them and you've been right and you felt validated, and you're like, see, I knew all along that that was the case. Perhaps you have known, but you have ignored your intuition, and then come to find that like you were right all along, and you should have honored that. It's basically saying, if you're having those types of experiences, you're probably going to continue to have those experiences, whether you fully accept and lean into your intuition and your deep knowing. So it's kind of like, why not? Right? And it's not something that you have to like broadcast to everyone because it is a very personal experience, and it's something that you can use. So there might be a sense of like, perhaps the reason why it's difficult for you to follow that is because if someone were to question you on it, you wouldn't have like a solid answer for them. You wouldn't have like a solid reason to be able to explain or defend, or a source of information. It's just a knowing. And you know, the average person does not take that seriously. They might kind of look at you and just be like, yeah, okay. All I have to say is that if you do have those people around you, and that is what is keeping you from feeling confident in trusting and connecting to your intuition, I would say like, try not to worry what those people think, because that is just reflective of their own wounds in terms of their ability to trust themselves and make the decisions that feel right to them. So it's really hard for people who don't trust their own intuition, or even acknowledge that that can be a valid way to move through the world. It's really hard if they don't have that connection or that belief in it in general. If they don't allow themselves to exist that way, it's hard for them to allow anyone else to, let alone to validate that that could be real, right? So I would say just don't let those people are always going to be around. Try not to let them deter you, because ultimately you're the one living your life. And at the end of the day, if your decisions are healthy and right for you, and they're taking you in a direction that's positive, it kind of doesn't matter, because the end result is going to speak for itself, right? So it's like, you're the one living your life. You're the one that has to kind of deal with the consequences of your decisions. And so what's most important is that you're doing something that aligns with you and feels right to you, because you know, you're going to have a relationship with yourself at the end of the day, no matter what. And you're going to have to reconcile whatever comes of the decisions that you make. And so it's like, if you've denied your intuition in the past and you felt like it didn't pay off for you, you can end up like regretting and like kicking yourself and then putting pressure on yourself. But then it doesn't necessarily make it easier to take that kind of leap in trusting your inner knowing, and that's an okay thing to do. Sometimes it can just breed fear and insecurity, especially if it's not being encouraged by people around us. So I would say, like, also, if you believe in things like the collective unconscious, and a lot of the greatest artists and inventors and like the greatest minds, like even Albert Einstein, they recognized that they were able to connect with almost like a source of information or understanding that was beyond them. And that's why a lot of times, they would, meditate, or they would get answers or find inspiration through dreams. And the idea is that we are more readily able to connect that unconsciousness, like that greater, or like the hive mind kind of thing. The hive mind is generally a negative term. I shouldn't have said that. But it's kind of like all of that information, all of the information and the knowledge of like the greatest minds, it's accessible to us in one way or another. So if that is something that interests you, you might want to look into that, because that might help you in like rectifying like what it is that intuition is and how we can sense things that are beyond our understanding, and that that aren't necessarily reflected in our physical environment or what is obvious to us, but it's still true and real. So because deep knowing is about recognizing that you do have the ability to tap into that. I think that you already know this and you've experienced it. It is something that you're meant to give a little bit more space in your life, and probably having to work through any insecurities when it comes to figuring that out, like figuring out how your intuition speaks to you, how your heart guides you, and kind of letting yourself make decisions based on that. Because there can be times when there's absolutely no way to explain something. There's no way that you could know something and you just know it, and you know it 100%, and it can be completely accurate even if there's no way to explain it, right? So we're not bound by the rules that we think that we're bound by. And this is kind of like almost approaching it with a curiosity, not necessarily putting pressure on yourself like it's something that you need to like work on and figure out and develop. Like, don't treat it like a task. This is more like, I think, like a journey of self-discovery and recognizing that, like, you pick up a lot of information and there's more available to you than maybe you even recognize, and that it can be true and real, and it's your relationship to yourself and to your intuition that is going to allow you to determine what that is, right? And with what you wants you, this is also to do with, manifestation, the law of attraction, The Secret, if that's a book you've read or a movie that you've watched. It's basically saying like the things that you feel the most drawn to, and not desires on like an illogical level, like, oh, I want to have like a perfect job and a perfect marriage and, lots of money. And it's like, it's not the things that we are conditioned to value and that often disconnect us from our intuition, like the pursuit of that does. And of course, those can be valid things that you truly do want, but it's taking the time to get to know yourself and connect with yourself and to figure out like what are your heart's desires? What is it that you feel would make you happy? Right? And kind of doing that investigation, like, what does that look like? What does that feel like? How would that materialize? Is it a creative outlet? Is it like you want to sing, or you want to dance, or you want to create art, create music, listen to music? Like, it could be literally anything, but it's recognizing like what that is to you. And if you don't know what that is, then it's kind of like this card coming out is encouraging you to take that time to connect with yourself and start feeling your way through it, and considering how that might look to you, what that might entail. And so it's not just recognizing what it is that your heart and your soul are calling you to do, but it's understanding that that is part of your intuitive awareness, and leaning into that, being aware of it, and allowing that to guide you is one of the most simple steps to kind of building your awareness of and trust in your intuition. Because it's like, that's like the very basic thing. It's like how somebody can know something is right for them or not. Like if you meet a person or you're in a relationship with a person, you ultimately know like, yeah, this is right for me, or no, it's not. And if it's unclear, then perhaps you need to have more experiences with that person in order to learn a lesson or gain clarity. So it's kind of like we can't necessarily describe why. And a lot of times we feel like, well, we have to stay with a person because we can't justify why they're not right for us. Or, the opposite could be true. So it's recognizing that like you have a lot of divine intelligence, intuitive awareness, and that speaks to you on the most basic level in terms of like your deepest desires and the things that you truly feel would make you feel happy and fulfilled, and allowing yourself to recognize that that is something important. That is a valid part of who you are, that deserves to be a part of your life. It's because quite often we're taught to shut down from those desires. It's like, well, no, you can't be happy. You can't just do things that make you happy. Why? If you can do things that make you miserable and live a life of misery, why can't you do things that make you happy? And that doesn't mean that every single thing that you do is going to make you happy. But it's like, why? What's the point in denying yourself the things that truly speak to you and call to you, because that's part of who you are and it's longing to be expressed. So this is basically saying that those things are meaningful, and the things that you want you. There's already a connection established there. They're already pretty much a part of your life on an energetic level, and it's just welcoming that in. And that as soon as you start to consider what that is and to connect with it and to allow it space in your life, then you're setting the wheel in motion so that things can start coming in for you, right? So it's like, it's kind of like it's waiting in the wings, and you have to give yourself permission to trust that you're sensing those things, you're wanting those things for a reason, and that you can have them. Because sometimes we're taught that it doesn't have value and that we should focus on practical things. So we deny ourselves. Sometimes we feel like we're not worthy of getting what we want. Like getting what we want is for other people, not for us. We're meant to like just suffer and put ourselves off. And sometimes we settle for like second best, because it's like, yeah, well, what I really want is this, but I'll take like a lesser version of it because like that's acceptable. So it's like sometimes we take the very things that are meant for us and we punish ourselves with them. So it's being aware of any way that you're limiting yourself in terms of what you're allowed to pursue, how you're allowed to experience joy and happiness in your life. And that this is like part of manifestation. So it's like, whether you recognize these things or not, they're already a part of you. They're already a part of your life. They're there. They're available to you. It's just a matter of trusting that your intuition is trying to take you in that direction, and perhaps healing your beliefs about it. So there's actually, I'll read you, there's a healing process associated with this card, and it's pretty short. So some of them are really, really long, but I figure I'll read this one for you. So the end thing says, this oracle brings you the message that whether you see it coming or not, your desire is already on its way to you. It's closer than you think, and soon you will be able to see it, touch it, feel it, and enjoy it. You will then become inspired for your next manifestation based on the true desires of your heart. So it's like the more you do it, the easier it becomes, right? You kind of like get that energy moving. But the healing process says, repeat this statement 3 times with feeling. And the statement is, what I want wants me, and I am open, willing, and capable to receive it through unconditional love now. So if you've heard anything about manifestation, it's the idea that we have to start connecting with the energy and the experience before we actually experience it. So it's not saying like happiness is waiting for us at some day or some time in the future based on some set of circumstances. It's saying like, well, if I really want happiness and this is how I feel like happiness will be achieved, this is what's most important to me, how will I feel when that happens? And what would happen if you were to act as though you were already in that space? So it's basically saying like, you're so connected to the things that you want that you can allow yourself to experience. So it's kind of like a hack, like a manifestation hack, is allowing yourself to feel what you want to feel now. And that will just further bring into your experience those very things that you want to feel. So it's the feeling and what's going on inside of you that kind of kickstarts and even amplifies the whole process. And so by experiencing it now, it'll just be drawn into you more quickly, I guess. And I think the other thing is recognizing that you don't have to wait to feel good. You don't have to wait to experience the things that you want to experience, that you can start now. And sometimes just getting yourself in that energy makes it easier to trust yourself. It makes it easier to honor yourself and to do the things that are good for you. Because these cards are both about like coming up against opposing energies, people who might question you, people who might put you down, people who might keep you kind of like in a box, anything that might be draining you, right? Or preventing you from being able to connect to yourself and to trust yourself and to follow your own inner knowing and to trust that that's a thing. And so this card here, deep knowing, can also be about setting energetic boundaries, being aware of the people and the things that drain you, and being willing to kind of take a step back from that. Because if your energy is being drained, then it's going to be a lot more difficult for you to connect to yourself, your intuition, and what is truly right for you. And so, yeah, there's definitely a lot of opportunity for intuitive development and just kind of like, yeah, like self-exploration, curiosity, but also kind of like disconnecting from the limiting beliefs that you have, the fears that you have, and anyone that might be amplifying that. And knowing that like this can also just be a very personal journey. It's not something that you can share with other people who are on the same level if it feels safe, or if there are other people who are doing something that you want to be doing, that you feel like are open. But it can be a deeply personal journey, not one that you have to broadcast or share with anyone else, because it doesn't really matter what anyone else thinks about it. So I think it's just like, yeah, giving yourselves permission. So I'm going to get your cards. So I would say, especially if you're somebody who recognizes like you're sensitive, that you pick up on a lot, but you're having maybe a hard time embracing it, to, any kind of intuitive practice that calls to you might be worth investigating. So your first card is the Two of Swords. Okay. Oh, another two. Second card is the Two of Pentacles. Oh, that one came out fast. Your third card is the Seven of Wands. And finally, we'll get one more. Just dropped a whole bunch. Okay, let's try this again. One more. Last card. Excellent. We have the Ten of Swords, and on the bottom of the deck, I'm going to move everything over. On the bottom of the deck, we have the Ten of Cups. So I like that. And I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I'll get all of your clarifiers right away and then read all of the cards together. So we'll clarify the Two of Swords first. So the Two of Swords clarified by the Daughter of Wands. And the Two of Pentacles clarified by the Eight of Pentacles. Okay, let's clarify Seven of Wands. What is this? Oh, it's Wands. At first I thought this was the Tower because it looked like a lightning strike. So yeah, interesting. 8 of Wands under the 7 of Wands. And finally under the 10 of Swords. Oh, we have the 10 of Pentacles. That's really cool. I really like this. Okay. Let's see. So it's interesting. At the bottom of the deck is the underlying energy. We have the 10 of Cups and the Father of Wands, which is typically the King of Wands. And so this is like, it's like a masculine energy, which means it tends to be more outward focused, more action oriented, more demonstrative, whereas the feminine energy is more like open and receptive and kind of laid back and letting things come in. So this can be a very strong, confident, like leader, being in a leadership role, being in a position of authority, a boss. It could be somebody who is in that position of authority above you that might be either influential or could be problematic. Like this is a very strong, passionate, charismatic type of person, whether for good or for bad. They have the ability to really influence people through passion. So it could be anger and frustration. It could also just be excitement and high energy. With it coming out with the 10 of Cups, the 10 of Cups is like the happily ever after, wish fulfilled type of card. So it's kind of telling me that this leadership, so you might be the person leading or trying to lead this journey, right? And to this 10 of Cups, or perhaps you've already gotten there. Like you've kind of maybe been the one running the show, wearing the pants, so to speak, and not in a bad way, but like maybe in whatever situation this is, it could be that you're just the one that's more passionate, that's more enthusiastic, maybe with a deeper sense of drive, or maybe a clearer vision of like what this happily ever after was. So the idea with the 10 of Cups is it's like the happily ever after has been achieved, or whatever you were looking to manifest or achieve has already come to fruition. So there's a sense of like recognizing that you were able to bring that into your awareness. It's allowing yourself to enjoy, you know, so in this case, it's like, it is a happily ever after, like happy couple, you know, happy family. It's like, you know, this beautiful, abundant, emotionally fulfilling energy. And it's recognizing that once you've kind of moved along the process and been able to manifest your desire, you have time to appreciate it. But then it's kind of like you focus on the next manifestation, right? So there's always going to be like a desire driving you. And so it could be that like you're at the stage now where it's like, okay, well, you achieved this thing, or maybe you manifested it, or whatever the case may be. And now you're in a position where it's like, okay, well, like, what's the next thing? Or maybe the way that you've always approached, like whatever the wish come true is, maybe the wish or the dream has changed, and you have to figure out like, okay, well, I've achieved this. So what's my next step? Or maybe my ideas about what this, you know, happily ever after has changed, and what do I need to do to get there? So that could very well, if that resonates for you, that could very well be what's going on here. But you're being encouraged to come into the month of April like see, it's interesting. So it's like, you know, finding balance, but also recognizing like it seems as though there's a decision that needs to be made. And this could be on any level. This could be a decision about you and your beliefs. It could be, you know, a direction that you're going to go in. It could be a relationship. It could be finances. It could be job. Because this has to do with your perceptions, your beliefs. And the 2 of Swords quite often is when we don't feel ready to make a decision, sometimes we try to blind ourselves to the fact that a decision needs to be made, right? So it can be procrastinating, it can be kind of avoidant. If we have a decision that needs to be made and we know what the decision is and it's not necessarily a fun one, we might not be ready to make the decision because we're afraid of what's going to ensue or the work that it might entail. And so we kind of try to pacify ourselves by being blind to that decision or trying to put it off. So that can be the energy, but also this is about trusting that when you don't have your sight, right? So what we perceive, so they say seeing is believing. If what we perceive by our eyes is what dictates the majority of the decisions that we make, then it's very easy to get into a space where we're overanalyzing, overthinking, and we're not necessarily connecting with our truth and our intuition. And so this is basically saying, like, if your vision is taken away from you and you can't make a decision. So for example, if you're at a fork in the road and you're blindfolded and you have to go in one direction or the other, how can you possibly make that decision if you don't see? Like, one could look obviously inviting and one could not, but you won't know that. And so it says, like, a lot of times when it comes down to decisions, we have to trust our intuition, our heart, and that a lot of times the unhelpful thoughts that come up and fears and limiting beliefs that can come up as a result of feeling blind, feeling like we're in the dark, feeling like we don't have the information we need to make the right choice, we tend to disconnect ourselves from any sense of knowing that we might have, because we get so caught up in worry and overthinking. And it could be even avoidance as a result of feeling that discomfort. And so this is about being empowered. And the Daughter of Wands, which is the Page of Wands, it's kind of being at a stage where you recognize your passion, you recognize your kind of like inner knowing and your whatever's calling to you, whatever feels right. This is very much, the type of energy, like what lights you up, what you feel most drawn to, like the things that you can't quite explain. It's just that little spark inside of you. So the Daughter of Wands is somebody who's ready to acknowledge that and take action on it. And it's like a very open-ended card. Like, you don't necessarily know where that's going to take you, and you don't necessarily have a huge amount of experience doing so, but it's allowing your passion to drive you and trusting that it's going to turn out. So there's very much the sense of connecting to your intuition, connecting to what you can sense, aside from like your thoughts and aside from what you're seeing in the world around you, using your own inner knowing and connecting with your own passions and figuring out, if I had to make a decision blind, so to speak, what is my heart, my body, what are my feelings telling me to do? What do I feel most drawn to? What feels right to me? And kind of doing like an internal check-in and weighing options. So that's very much the energy. It's just embracing that unknown and embracing like flying blind a little bit, and knowing that sometimes it takes making the decision that's heart guided and not the obvious choice necessarily, that kind of gets the ball rolling and makes it a little bit easier to determine step after step. Like the first step is always the most difficult, because we don't necessarily have experience that tells us that it'll work out. And the thing is, with humans, we're pretty resilient, and we have a way of getting through even the most difficult of things. We have a way of getting things to work out for us. Sometimes we take the longer, more difficult route, but we have the experiences that we need to, right? So that's what you're being encouraged to embrace coming into this month. Your challenge is going to be balancing things, really. So it might be balancing your emotions and your intuition with the more practical side of you, and needing to balance just everyday things, like how you show up in the material world. Because you see, like, she's kind of doing a dance with like a physical manifestation, and this is more of like an energy and an idea. And so it's saying, like, you are influenced by the physical world and you have to exist in the physical world, and there's no avoiding that. So you can't live solely in this energy where you're detached, right? But it's recognizing that you can pull from that inspiration, from that intuition, that collective unconscious, the things that are the information that is available to you that you can't physically see with your eye, and that can still influence things in the physical world, and it can influence your perception and your decisions to help you make moves in the physical world. But it's like, we don't want to go too far in one direction or the other. And that might be a challenge for you. Perhaps if you have been a pretty practical person, you've made logical, strategic decisions, and you've been very much focused on the practical side of things, it might be more difficult for you to allow yourself to venture out into the ether a little bit and to see what kind of knowledge and wisdom is there for you, and to start being able to take inspired action on that and seeing how it might change things. And for it to come up with the Eight of Pentacles, the Eight of Pentacles is a card of like refinement, practice. It's kind of like the apprentice. So you're really just putting the work in to practice your craft, to hone your skills. It's not necessarily like a super glorified, successful feeling type of energy. It's just like anything that you're learning how to do, you're going to need to be in this energy. It's going to be a process. It's going to take time, dedication, energy, focus, consistent steps. So it's basically saying like, it might be challenging for you to start incorporating maybe more of your knowing, your inner knowing into your life. And that is a practice, right? It's going to take practice. It's going to take time. And it's something that you have to do consistently. It's an energy that you're going to have to allow yourself to connect to. So you're not necessarily going to have it all sink in immediately or make big moves or big decisions immediately. And this is very often about starting small, like starting somewhere. So it could even just be like, for example, if intuition and your knowing is something that you want to start incorporating, maybe giving yourself the chance to connect with some type of intuitive practice, some type of test. It could be like setting an intention to, see or experience a certain thing and seeing, how that shows up for you. So it could be just like fun little, you can even Google like ways to develop your intuition, but like there are fun little ways that you can incorporate that into your day-to-day without it being like a major paradigm shift for you, without having to get like too out there and without having to use that in making big decisions that might be kind of difficult. So it's like easing your way into it, practicing, but allowing it to be an area of consistent focus and not getting discouraged and not getting thrown off balance if things are not feeling easy or materializing immediately. This is very much like I said, it's the apprentice, working to become the master and to keep that balance, because that ultimately, even as you continue along your path and your connection to yourself and your inner knowing, you're going to need to be maintaining that balance even when you've kind of mastered your ability to recognize your intuition, because like I said, we still exist in the physical world. So we kind of have to, that's a dance that's always in motion, right? Like we never strike a balance and that's it. It's always in flux, and it's always something that we have to be conscious of and working toward when we're making decisions. So that could very well be a challenging energy for you this month, but your recommended kind of energy is Seven of Wands. So to overcome this balance, it's recognizing that like focusing on your own kind of self-care, your own inner peace, your connection to yourself, setting energetic boundaries, being mindful of your energy, who has access to that energy, what you do with that energy, and making sure that it's kind of like having a safe space, but this is also self-knowing. It's like knowing and loving yourself enough to do what's right for you, to value and honor yourself, and not to allow yourself to be thrown off or knocked off. So the Seven of Wands is often a card of like facing opposition. It could be feeling like you're at a disadvantage, or you're being attacked or judged, or there are people that are just, or situations that are just trying to knock you off your game. And it's recognizing that like the only thing that can knock you off your game or off your little pedestal here is you, right? And so as long as you're connecting to yourself and what's important to you, as long as you're like, you've got a good level of emotional awareness, you're working through whatever you're experiencing, you're making decisions that are healthy for you on all levels, that you get to make the decision how much that external noise can affect you. And as soon as you start focusing on it and worrying about it and taking it to heart and overthinking, then it can take root and it can get away from you really quickly. And that's what the Eight of Wands is basically saying. Like whatever you focus on is going to manifest quickly. It's going to impact quickly. It's going to have power. And so it's making sure that your energy and your focus are kind of keeping yourself centered and aligned, doing what you need to do. And if you feel like triggered, or you feel like defensive, or there's some kind of thorn in your side, and as soon as you start to experience those emotions, it's recognizing that that's a normal response to encountering that type of energy, but you have the power to decide what you're going to do with that and how much power you're going to give that over you, how much of your attention and energy is going to be consumed by it. And if that's going to be beneficial to you or not. And if not, what is going to be most beneficial to you? What's going to be most healthy? What's going to be most helpful? Where is your energy best used, right? And so it's kind of recognizing your own personal power. And if there are people specifically that are kind of getting at you, it's recognizing that, you know, chances are it's because you're doing the right. So it's like they say, like, people throw rocks at things that shine. So it's like, if you just start to connect with yourself and start to honor yourself, set boundaries, do what's right for you, follow your intuition, and people are criticizing you or challenging you, or they can't quite understand, that's totally fine. That's their own thing, but it's likely because you're getting into that energy and they recognize that shift in you, and that's highlighting maybe that they need to do the same kind of work. And so it's also kind of like, you might need to lead by example, and that's part of what you want wants you. It's recognizing that that's a part of you that's longing to be expressed, giving yourself permission regardless of what other people say or think, because you know, by allowing yourself to live a heart-centered life that makes sense to you and to connect with joy and passion, you might inspire others to do the same thing. But it's up to them whether they're going to be inspired by you or triggered by you. And these wands are people who are triggered by you. So it's recognizing that sometimes when we're doing just what's right for us, even if it's quietly and it's not impacting anyone else negatively, sometimes we inevitably attract this. And this Eight of Wands, it can be a card of like fast, passionate movement. It can be really like focused, driven energy. It also can have to do with communication coming in. So you might have like aggressive communication coming in. You might be feeling the need to respond aggressively. And it's kind of like connecting with your inner peace, checking in with yourself and figuring out like she's kind of not worried about anything else that's going on around her because she's in this like happy, safe place. And I think it's also important for you to kind of have that safe place for yourself where you can decompress, you can find your center when things around you start to get tumultuous, because this energy is a huge part of being able to connect to and trust that inner knowing. So the neat thing is the highest possible outcome for this month, kind of following along this energy, is releasing all of those limiting beliefs, all of those fears. It's kind of being at the end of the road where it's like, you might, through this process of leaning into yourself or developing your connection to yourself, your intuition, trusting your inner knowing, however that might make sense to you, even if it's just purely from the sense of, you know, manifestation, law of attraction, you might get a completely different perspective on how things can be done and how you are allowed to move through the world and what is valuable. So, you know, especially if if the whole like follow your heart thing seems too like hippy dippy out there, like that's not real or that's not a way to live life. It's like, you might be surprised that if you start allowing yourself to connect to your inner knowing, that you're going to be making more healthy, empowered decisions. And that might already begin to kind of take shape in such a way that you're like, wow, why didn't I do this sooner? Like, I didn't realize that I was going to be able to experience something like this. And it might completely like set you free from the fear, the limiting beliefs, the criticisms, like any kind of like dark thoughts that keep you from doing what feels right, or that get you stuck in you know, obsessive like rumination or overthinking, overthinking to the point where you talk yourself out of something that you feel like is right for you because it just seems too risky. Like, this is it. It's like leaving all of those things behind and kind of looking out on the horizon. So all of those thoughts are kind of floating away. And the 10 of Swords is about an ending, right? And the ending is, you've had all of these experiences, you've learned what you needed to learn, so there's inevitably things that you need to let go of in order to move on to the next thing. Same thing with manifestation. Once you've reached your heart's desire, you've manifested that desire, then you've got it, and then inevitably you're changed by that. That's going to change your perspective, it's going to change what you want moving forward, and you're going to have to kind of take stock of what's working for you, what's not, what's going to help you continue to ascend, to continue to develop this relationship to yourself, to follow your heart and try and manifest your dreams, and what isn't, you know, what's detracting from that, what is disempowering, you know, and letting those things go so that you can have more energy to focus on moving in the direction that's right for you. And for that to come up with the 10 of Pentacles, The Ten of Pentacles is all about, you know, material abundance. So it's kind of the material. This is very much like emotional fulfillment. So you could have your 10 of Cups happily ever after without having a huge amount of material abundance and stability, because that might not be what happily ever after looks like to you. The 10 of Pentacles is kind of like the material equivalent of this card. So it's like, it is material abundance. It's a physical manifestation of your desires. And it could be, you know, stability. It could be relationships. It could be career. It could be your retirement fund. Like however that applies to you. But this is very much being in a stable position in a material sense. And like that might be what it takes for you to understand that you can follow your heart and still manifest abundance in the physical world. Like you don't have to totally denounce anything material in order to connect to your intuition. Like that's just, right? Like that seems unreasonable. So that is basically saying like you can kind of free yourself from those limiting beliefs, and you can connect to or realize either physical abundance or the opportunity, right? So it might kind of reframe your ability on, or your understanding of what it is that you can manifest and how. So it might not be that you actually come into that abundance and manifestation, but it might be that you have a new perspective on what's possible and how you can get there, which might further kind of like, these are both endings. So it's like letting go and moving in a new direction. So chances are by the end of the month or throughout the course of the month, you might get a lot of clarity on what your next step is, what your next wish that you're going to work toward, your next desire that you want to manifest is, and how you might go about working toward that. And it might not be in the regular practical way that you're used to. It might be in a more intuitive way, but there's still practicality to intuition, right? So kind of all balances out. Really interesting. All right, I know this has gone on forever, so we will get you your affirmations, but I think that's really lovely because you're kind of starting out with these 2s, and then you're seeing these 10s come to completion. And it is very much all about you being in your power, self-trust, focus on yourself. So I'm gonna get the sense like no more self-sacrificing, whether it's like mentally, your mental health, your physical health, your emotional health. Like, don't be taking unnecessary hits, right? It's more like you want to build yourself up, not tear yourself down. Okay, so to travel further on my path of personal growth, I call on my spiritual running buddies. So like I said, there might be people, you don't have to, if this is something that you want to connect with, you don't have to broadcast it to the world and like make it a huge part of your life. It can be a personal thing, but there might be people who are already kind of on that wavelength that might be able to help and support you when you're struggling, especially if you're finding it difficult, not only to trust yourself, but to find the balance between the physical and the spiritual, or the material and the spiritual. When I feel blocked, emotionally distressed, or overwhelmed, I turn to my breath. Very much goes hand in hand with that 7 of Wands card, which is like she's very contemplative, meditative, relaxed. So breath work might be something. I don't know if I mentioned it to you last month, but box breathing, which is a really helpful calming practice to kind of like get you reset, kind of calm your nervous system down a little bit. So a big, long, deep belly breath in for 4 seconds. Hold that breath for 4 seconds. Exhale for 4 seconds. Hold for 4 seconds, and then inhale again. So repeat that process a few times. You can do it as many times as you like. That might be helpful if you don't already have some kind of breathing technique. We've got peace is in my pulse. And that very much also speaks to that 7 of Wands energy, where it's like, it doesn't matter what is going on outside of you, what people are saying or doing, you get to choose peace, you get to connect with your inner truth, and you don't have to give your power away to anyone else. So you're the ruler of your own domain. And then in the midst of a meltdown, I breathe through the discomfort and come out the other side. So there we go. It all kind of connects. So yeah, and this also goes along with like the forged in fire. you know, being poked with wands. That could be the test, that could be the struggle. And it might be something that sparks your anger and your temper and frustration, and that you really, really have to kind of focus on going to this Zen space where you're staying in your power and you're making decisions that are right for you instead of being reactive. And yeah, you might feel blocked, stressed, challenged. You might have some meltdowns. So it's basically saying, like, breathe, find your inner peace. I think that's going to be really important to you, because I do get the sense that this is all just kind of fortifying you, right? It's making you stronger. And I think approaching it as such allows you to take it less personally if shit is really hitting the fan, or people are really coming after you, or, you know, however resistance is showing up for you this month. It's like, it's all within you, and you can connect to your inner peace simply by allowing yourself to breathe. Oh, and then your oracle card, you're already doing it. Stop overthinking. Keep facing your true north. Like I said, it's already a part of you. You know it, you feel it. That's what your intuition is at the most basic level. And your overthinking can be your own worst enemy, right? So hold on. I'm going to read this directly from the guidebook for you. I just have to find it. Sorry. Okay, let me find. I will read directly from the book. So we'll see how that ties everything together, and that will finish off your reading. Okay. Sorry, it's taking a while. Okay, so you're already doing it. Stop overthinking. Keep facing your true north. Love it. Speaks so wonderfully to all of this here already. Do not question things so much. You are on the right track. You are facing the right way. Stop overthinking it. It's happening, and you are closer than you think. This card also says you're closer than you think, as does this one. You're exactly where you need to be, and things are moving at the perfect speed. Do not rush it. Now is not the time to be impatient. Now is the time to walk steady. There is no rush. What you are building is being built. What you have planted soon will blossom. With every new day, a brick is being laid. You have come a long way. The foundations are steady. Now all that is needed is for you to trust and keep walking forward. If a thought that things should be moving faster enters your head, that is just your ego comparing your rising to someone else. Comparison is not your friend. Stay in your lane, water your own garden, knowing that your time to bloom will come. And yeah, the kind of recommendation at the end says you're already doing it. Keep going. So like I said, you might already know maybe the ways that you've honored your intuition, or your knowing, or what is right for you, what feels right. When you followed it, you've been rewarded, and when you've ignored it, it's kind of burnt you a little bit. So you already have access to what exactly it is. You already know what it is. It's just not, it's getting out of your own way, right? And that very much speaks to, you know, this Two of Swords, freedom from overthinking being kind of like the outcome if you are moving through things in this manner this month. So I think that is a really nice way to tie everything together. I feel like that's a very encouraging statement. Like, you guys needed to hear that. So you're already doing it. Just keep going. And the more that you trust yourself, the more that you honor that, the more obvious your connection to that is going to be, and the easier it's going to be able to continuously follow it. So it's a practice. It takes time. Don't worry. But yeah, Aries, that is your reading. I hope this was helpful. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please feel free to like this video. Even, you know, leave me a comment, share with anyone you think might be interested. If you haven't already, you can head on over to my channel at Bright Soul Collective Tarot and take a look at my other readings. And subscribe to my channel so that you can stay up to date on new videos as they're posted. And yeah, I think this is a really lovely reading, especially for you, Aries, during your birthday season, kind of like new energy. It's time to start honoring yourself. I think that's really beautiful. I hope this is helpful to you. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm so satisfied with this reading for you. And yeah, I look forward to reading for you again next month. And in the meantime, I'm wishing you all the very best.